Systems of linear equations, determinants. Number 1 says find the value of each determinant. Now if we look at the definition of a determinant down below us here, it says the determinant of any square matrix. Now a square matrix is where my number of rows, so I have 2 rows here, equals the number of columns. So rows by columns is 2 by 2. So that's what we call a square matrix. And it says where A, B, C, and D are real numbers is, they use these absolute value marks here for the A, B, C, D, and it says it equals AD minus BC. So the way I look at this is I times those, A times D, and I minus my B times C. So that's what we're going to do below here for number A. So that means I would take 8 times 2, which is 16, so I'll go 2 times 8. And then I would go minus, and then negative 3 times positive 4. And that's going to equal 16 plus 12, which equals 28. So there's our first answer, 28. That's our determinant. Now let's take a look at number B here. Now if you look at this square matrix, this is what we call a 1 row, 2 row, 3 row by 1, 2, 3 columns. So this is a 3 by 3 matrix, which is still a square matrix because my rows equals my columns. But if you notice here, this is only set up for a 2 by 2 matrix. So we're going to need a different formula for this one. So the way this one works here is I'm just going to look at this first row here, and that's going to help me develop my initial setup here. So for instance, if I'm looking at A, or this first entry here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore this first column and that first row. So I'm going to end up with 4 times, and again, like I said, I'm going to ignore those first row and first column there. So I'm going to get a negative 1, which is here, and a 0 here, and then a negative 3, and then a positive 4. And that's going to be my first one. So again, I take that first entry, and I times it by, and I cross off that first column and first row, this determinant here. And that's what we see to the right there. So I'm going to do the same thing now, but for the second entry. So again, I'm just going to go along this first row and take each entry this way. So now I'm going to not use this second column here, the rest of it, and then the top row as well. So this is going to leave a 6 and a 1 and a 0 and a 4. So that's going to be, and right away before I write this, I put a negative there because that's the process. So then I'm going to have that negative 1 there because that's what that entry is going to be. And it's going to be times. Now remember, I'm going to take that first entry, get rid of that middle column there, and then the top row. And this is going to be 6, 1, and 0, 4. And there's my second one. Now for the third one here, I'm going to take that third entry, which is a 2, and I'm going to say plus 2, and then I'm going to times that by. Now again, I'm going to take that third entry there across the top row, and I'm going to cross off that top row and the third column because that's where my 2 lies, and I'm going to end up with a 6, negative 1, and 1, negative 3. So all of this together is going to eventually be my determinant of my 3 by 3 matrix. Now I'm just going to write it below so you can see it all in one string. So then I'm going to get here equals 4 times, and I'm going to do this 1 times negative 4, which is going to be negative 4, minus, remember it's always a minus here, and it's going to be 0 times negative 3, which is 0. And then here I have minus a negative 1. So that's really just going to be a minus 1. Or I should say a plus 1, excuse me. And then this determinant is going to be 6 times 4, which is 24. And then minus 1 times 0, which is 0. And then for the last one here, it's going to be plus 2. And then I'm going to have 6 times negative 3, which is negative 18. And then minus negative 1 times 1, which is negative 1. So that's what we get so far. Now we got to clean this all up here. And then our final answer would be, it's going to be negative 16 plus 24 minus 34. So that's going to be negative and negative there. That's going to be 40, 50 there. So negative 50 minus 24 is going to be negative 26. So there's our final answer for that one. So now one thing to keep in mind here, remember we alternate signs. So what I mean by that is, remember here, this is going to be a positive, this one's going to be a negative, and this one's going to be a positive. Now if this was a negative 2, that would still be a negative there, but just the initial is going to be positive, negative, positive. And that's something to remember here, along with the design of how this is set up. So our answer is negative 26.